Well, we're going to transition to our trending topic, but before we do that, do us a favor. We love making this podcast each week. We hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoy creating it. The best way that you can support us is to leave a review wherever you're listening. Your feedback really does help us out, so we greatly appreciate it.
And you can email me money directly, which
Yes.
is fine as well.
Yes, Bitcoin, Venmo,
Yeah,
whatever
Venmo.
it may be.
Groceries.
Well, let's switch to our trending topic, Joker. Let's talk about this film and why are we talking about it today? Well, first and foremost, it's because it is a sensation globally. It is the number one film for 2 weeks in a row. In 11 days at the time of this recording, it has already made over $200 million. And it won the Golden Lion Award, which is the top award at the Venice International Film Festival. But with it, the film has brought up a lot of conversation about the film itself or the state of our nation when it comes to men, mental illness, violence, or romanticizing or sympathizing with villains or people that do evil and hurtful deeds towards others. And so I really wanted to first and foremost, Frank, hear what your take was in terms of what did you think of the film? How much or how little did you enjoy it?
The experience of watching this film is one of the top experiences of any film I've ever seen. I was stressed out watching it, very, very stressed. But I was also worried. I'm worried about the film and a disenfranchised, young, isolated man watching this film and saying, I can do what Joker did. And it was kind of scary, but it's one of those films that made me – I saw it at 10 o'clock. We got it at 12:30, and I just thought about it for 2 days straight and replaying some of those moments and the look on Joaquin Phoenix's face and feeling pity for him, but then also just horror. And, I mean, it's just psychologically so rich.
Okay. Well, I liked the film. I really enjoyed it. I didn't love the film, but I didn't hate the film. And it's really interesting. I think this probably says more about both of us. I have this theory that Joker, the film, is really a Rorschach test for what people are worried about and what they fear. Mm-hmm. And so you always joke that I'm just emotionally dead inside.
I don't joke. You are.
And so I watched it. I really enjoyed it, but I found it, for the most part, predictable. So the tension really didn't really get to me because I could see around the corner what was likely to happen. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it, and I went home and I went to sleep.
Wow.
And so it's interesting that, to me, how it has created such a visceral experience for a lot of people.
Well, it's also, I mean, obviously my childhood was not like the Joker, but there are moments of I can relate to, especially the scene where he gets beaten by his sandwich board or whatever that thing's called, the spinner. And I'm like, been there. That was rough.
Well, what about smothering the mother with the pillow?
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. Spoiler alert.
I did not see that coming. Absolutely didn't see that coming.
Okay. But that's not part of your childhood.
No.
That's not what you relate to.
Nope.
Okay, that's good. Then we can continue on, and this is not an intervention for Frank.
We'll keep rolling. That's good.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the issues it raises, because you mentioned, like, you found yourself worrying about this film, worrying about somebody watching this film and maybe taking away the wrong message. But there are a lot of hot button or sensitive topics that this film kind of at least addresses, whether it be childhood trauma and abuse, generational mental illness, the absence of father figures for boys, a culture of dehumanizing and humiliating others, elitism and class differential, as well as romanticizing vigilantes. So there obviously can be more than just that. But Frank, even if it worries you, what were some of the issues or topics that you thought the film addressed in a delicate or sensitive way or a thoughtful way?
Well, I feel like the entire film did it very thoughtfully, because you start with, you don't know his true background and what his childhood was like, but you see this guy struggling and trying to make his way through life and trying to get people to laugh, is working hard, has some goals, has some dreams, and just scene by scene, he just descends into this cold madness where he just says, "That's it. I'm just gonna go chaos on you." But I'd say that some of the the PTSD, how that was handled, but also I thought it was fascinating, and this is a bunch of spoilers, is where you see these scenes with him involved romantically with somebody. And none of that was true. It was just all in his head. And I did not see that coming. I had no clue that none of that was real. But while I'm watching the scenes, I'm thinking, that's kind of odd. I mean, I guess maybe she's really lonely. I don't know. But it was all not real.
Of all people, I would have thought that you would have picked up on a romance that wasn't real. But
whoa, well, this is whew. That's a humdinger there, buddy.
Well, and one of the challenges that I had with this movie was I struggle with origin stories because by their very design, they're meant to explain things. And I am somebody that values and appreciates mystery and the unknown. And so when a lot of people that I'm reading think pieces or they object to this movie or have problems saying that it's so dangerous or it represents mental illness in such a negative light, my first thought is like, but how many mental illnesses and traumas did they give this one guy? Like, you have an
all of them.
Seriously, I mean, we're talking most likely attachment disorder, trauma from abuse, trauma from neglect,
brain disorder,
probably, he has hallucinations in a lot of ways. He's got poor social skills. In some ways, he's been roped into almost like a surrogate partner for his mother. I mean, how much more can this guy...
Washing her?
Yeah, how much more... It's like, it's dangerous, and I know that there are people out there, but they basically just piled on the mental illness and trauma with this guy. How is it not going to affect him in some which way, shape, or form?
I'll tell you this. I mean, this thing's full of spoilers, but I love origin stories as well. And while I'm watching this film, I'm thinking, okay, this is the story of Joker. But then when you meet Bruce Wayne's dad, and you start seeing that woven in, that was amazing for me when he met little Bruce Wayne at the gate and put his fingers in his mouth. That was just a wild scene for me.
Yeah.
But then also they've kind of changed it up in that it wasn't Joker that killed Batman's parents. It was just a random guy with a mask, which makes that story even more interesting to me, that it was just chaos. There was no purpose to it.
Well, he's an accidental villain in a lot of ways, at least for the movement. I mean, he targets... There's really three scenes of violence towards others. The first one is really when he snaps. The second one is deliberate. And then the third one is deliberate. But what happens in larger Gotham with the mass mobs really is accidental. He's not really orchestrating the movement. It's really about young, disenfranchised men and women who feel a connection to the anger and abandonment that they feel like the city and that generation has put on them, which is, to me, a more interesting conversation about Joker and how some people think that it's capturing the cultural zeitgeist of the moment, and these conversations that we're having about young men in violence, active shooters, the incels. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it's for young men who have involuntarily are living a celibate lifestyle because they cannot find a romantic sexual partner. And so what do you make of the larger conversation about Joker and what's going on with men in our culture? Like you said, like you were really worried that this could really be taken the wrong way by some people.
There was one particular scene that really bothered me. It was visceral, is when it was almost a crucifixion scene.
Okay.
Where he was run over by a car or knocked unconscious, and then they carried him. He was on the hood of this car, and then he kind of stood up and did this dance, and it felt almost like he's being reborn. And he was reborn, but into this monstrosity. And I think that's what, with the 24-hour news cycle and with the advent of Columbine and everybody trying to do more of that these are disenfranchised men for a variety of reasons that are looking to be reborn in some fashion, to get the fame, to get the notoriety, which is not necessarily, well, that was what Joker was doing, to get on that TV show and be a comedian and get famous, but none of it ever worked. So he finally just says, all right, well, then I'm going to get famous this way.
Well, do you think he wanted to be famous at the end, or do you think he wanted to get back at Murray because Murray humiliated him by playing that stand-up clip? Like I'm not entirely sure about the motive, and I'll just kind of put it out there. I'm not sure that this film is as deep as some people say it is. The running joke around here is that I kind of think of Joker similar to Billy Joel's song, "We Didn't Start the Fire." It just name checks and references a lot of things, but it really doesn't say anything very deep or specific about them. It's kind of an origin story really stuffed with a lot of things that only one person could take so much before they snap. And in the case of Arthur, he snaps and turns into the Joker. But
for me, I agree with everything you're saying. The problem with me in a movie is I can suspend belief very easily, and I get really attached to a character, or I get really mad at a character. And this performance and the way he twisted his face and he moved his body, I was almost forgetting the story altogether and looking at this performance and how he pulled off all the symptoms and all the emotions, beginning from this poor guy trying to make a little boy laugh on a bus to, I'm now going to shoot you in the face.
Well, there's no doubt Joaquin Phoenix's performance is magnificent. I mean, he fully commits in very large ways, but in very subtle ways as well. And I think his performance, the film would not work without his performance. And I think in some ways that's part of the problem that people might have, is that it's such a charismatic performance that they might translate that into believing that the film is either sympathetic to Joker or it's endorsing his ideals and beliefs, which again, I'm not sure if he has any. I think he becomes an accidental villain. But one of the things that you brought up was just kind of worried that this would fall into the wrong hands. But why then does this movie feel more threatening than other films? Why? Because I know this is true for you. We've had these conversations. Why is a violent video game where somebody, or Grand Theft Auto, where there's a lot of laws being broken and people are in harm's way, why do those pop culture products not stoke as much fear about falling in the wrong hands? Because they can. I mean, all it takes is somebody just not of sound mind and judgment to look for confirmation bias, something that just confirms their already established extreme beliefs. Why this film? Is it getting such a politicized kind of perspective on?
Well, in the same way, video games have been politicized, even though video games do not cause mass shootings. Most mass shooters don't even play video games. And the thing about a video game is you just suspend belief. You're okay, you're in space, or you're in a war or whatever. And the video games that cause people to be the most aggressive afterwards are things like driving games, NHL, NBA, 2K, NFL, because people have played those and there's a spot in their brain to help them understand it. But I think with the Joker, the thing that a video game's not doing is saying, oh, wow, I can really relate to how he was humiliated over and over and over. And the other piece of it is I wonder how much this movie would have been politicized if police and SWAT teams weren't outside of theaters before the movie. Like, that already primes the pump of, I need to be afraid.
Yeah, I mean, then that's a great point when we think about how culture and media, how much are they responsible for stoking the flames? When you think about prior to its release, the families of the victims of the Aurora Theater mass shooting sent a letter voicing their concerns about the film sympathizing or romanticizing a disgruntled loner who turns to violent means. And they basically put out there, like, we're worried that the wrong person's going to see this film and they're going to take it the wrong way, and then they're going to act in similar fashion as Joker. So they're already laying out a fear that it's hard to know if that existed. We hear about reported incidents of threats to theaters and showings. There have been canceled showings, increased security, and in some cases, interesting, some places bar men from seeing the film by themselves. They have to come with other people.
Wow.
Which is interesting because I went and saw the film by myself.
Right.
But the idea of, like,
If you wore these clothes, though, they wouldn't worry about that.
maybe
Saying.
so that hurts. So and I'm very sensitive to that, Frank.
Yeah, super sensitive.
But it makes you question the chicken the egg dilemma. It's like, where is this hysteria really coming from? Is it the film itself, or is it the media's framing of the film, and then a fearful society eats it up?
Well, and also, I mean, that one shooting was Batman.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we're building this critical mass of people who know somebody who are part of a mass shooting. And so we're getting an increased number of people who are going to be relating to this or afraid of this, and so then you have more voices crying out against it.
So I kind of want to pivot beyond just Joker and talk about, what do we do about this issue with young men? Because on the one hand, they're talking about, loners, disenfranchised, disgruntled. So everybody, I think, is aware of the problem, but nobody's talking about, like, what do we do? Versus, it feels like right now, sympathizing, not with Joker, but sympathizing with young men, disgruntled men, that it feels like it's been so politicized that they already have this target as they're the enemy. They're the problem.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think this is related to the current political climate of just disenfranchised men?
I don't think here in the era of Trump, what we're seeing just happened because of Trump. I think Trump happened because of a lot of things that weren't being addressed and acknowledged in years and years prior. I think that we struggle as a society to address the needs of all, just in different ways. So the indignities of people of color and the power differential of women and gender politics, they all are very real and they all need to be addressed. But I believe in a lot of ways it's been at the expense of also recognizing men are a sizable population of this country. Every person, most people know a young man that they love and greatly care about. Have we thrown them under the bus and really villainized and scapegoated them? Because even though the system, a lot of our nation's systems favor them, it doesn't mean that they are resilient, that they don't feel pain, that they don't feel rejection and loneliness. But it just feels like we're like, with them, we speak out of two sides of our mouth. On the one hand, it's like men need to open up and men need to talk about it. And on the other hand, it's like, stop complaining. You think you have it bad.
Yes.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I think it's I feel like we have become less individual or person-centric, and that we're looking at these massive cultural issues, and we're empowering certain groups of people, but we're not looking at sort of how is this young man created, and how are we creating a psychological culture that not only benefits women and minorities and stuff like that, but also not forgetting young men and getting them a skill set so they can manage what is arguably one of the most stressful times in our country.
It's got to be difficult to have this mindset of the world is against me.
Yeah. I wouldn't know what that's like, but keep going.
And I'm not saying that it's an accurate mindset, but there seems to be a lot of rhetoric on social media and online that really does not promote reconciliation or collaboration. It's divisiveness, right? It's find your tribe, and then it's an echo chamber in a lot of ways. And so that is something I do think that Trump didn't create, but he certainly has, our current political climate has. But I think the Democrats right now, in all of their wisdom, are doing the same thing. And so you have both sides screaming at each other, saying that the other side is the problem, without really offering a lot of thoughtful remedies or solutions. So I think we're in a period of time where there's a lot of scapegoating, but not a lot of problem-solving conversations.
Right.
Because young, disadvantaged, awkward, uneducated men, there's not a quick fix. But it also means that this didn't happen overnight. Like, we have neglected this demographic for a long period of time.
I would agree with that.
So final solution, even though it's complicated, if there was, one of your worries is like someone's going to go see Joker and they're going to walk away just with the wrong message. So if we happen to have a listener or a viewer that kind of felt like our society has kind of given up on them, kind of sort of sees them more as the problems, kind of feels devalued, dehumanized, really struggling to feel belonged and accepted, what would be something that as a mental health professional that you would like for them to take away from this episode on Joker?
It's going to sound trite, but go to therapy, no matter how scary it might be, and that you haven't opened up to anybody. And there's the stigma of going to see a therapist. It makes all the difference in the world. And taking that risk with somebody who's a professional, not necessarily an institution or a boss or somebody like that, but saying, I really want to take a look at this and maybe have a more fulfilling, less lonely, less isolated life, then that's really the place to start.
No, I think that's very wise and very thoughtful. I would want people to hear that, and again, anytime you talk in this manner, it can feel trite. It can feel so Hallmark in its syrupy sort of presentation. But I think a lot of young men need to hear that you matter. Like, you are important. You have value, and that you don't have to go through these struggles alone by yourself. But you got to find the right people that are going to help you out of this, rather than reinforce a very extreme, a very troubled or violent worldview of like how to deal with disappointment and frustration and loneliness in our society. So you do matter. I just would encourage you to find individuals and folks that see your value outside of extreme or violent means.
Well said.
Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Shrink Tank Podcast. For Frank Gaskill, I'm Jonathan Hetterly here in Charlotte. Thanks for watching. Tell all your friends about us and make it a great week.